Welcome to our Where Should I Publish My Research workshop. This is part of our Work Smart Library workshops that the FIU Libraries does. Thank you for being here with us today. So a little bit about our presenters. I'm joined today by Sabine Dantis. She is our outreach and reference librarian at the Hubert Library at the Biscayne Bay campus. Also with us today is Ramses Marsmilli, and he's one of our reference and instruction librarians at the Green Library here on the MMC campus. And myself, Daisy de la Rosa, I'm an information and instruction services librarian at the FIU Medical Library. And also Dr. Lana Karshmer, she couldn't make it with us today, but she is responsible for some of the content that we are covering. So before we kind of jump in, we wanted to ask our audience and see what brings you today to our session. So Sabine has launched our poll here, just letting us know, a little bit about you, what department you're affiliated with, how comfortable you already are with the topic, and if there's anything that you want to learn about specifically, and we'll try to address that. So let's give that maybe about a minute or so. Okay, so let's give it maybe 20 more seconds. And then if we don't answer, if you don't feel comfortable, that's totally okay. As we go through the session, you can always put your questions in the chat as we go through the content. If you have any specific questions, or after the presentation, after the recording, if you want to ask us about your specific research project, we can help answer those questions as well. So I'm going to end the poll just to get us going. Yep. Okay. We did have a response here. Okay. Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much. Okay. So Sabine, are you able to end the poll and show the, okay.
You want to share the results? Or?
Yeah. Great. Okay.
I don't know where it went to.
Yeah, I see it here. Oh yeah, I do see that it doesn't show. Okay.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I think we let's see, we have everyone is novice and they're
Okay.
learning the ropes. So it's the question was, how comfortable are you with the topic? So they're learning the ropes is the perfect workshop for you guys to learn a little bit more about publishing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to stop sharing the results and close this up. Okay. All right, so a little bit about what we're covering today. So we wanted to make sure that you are familiar at least with a nice overview of the scholarly publishing process, the publishing landscape, and this includes some key concepts and terms that will help you navigate that landscape as far as like what is open access, what are your different options for publishing, a little bit about author rights, right, depending on where you publish. And then we'll talk a little bit about some resources and strategies and tools that will help you identify different publishing opportunities, including potential journals that you may want to submit your work to. And then once you identify some potential journals, we're going to give you some tips on how to evaluate those journals in terms of scope, right, or fit. Does your research fit well with this journal's aims? To remind you to look at their requirements, and of course legitimacy as you're evaluating the quality of these journals. And we'll talk a little bit about metrics as well and what they mean. So first, navigating the publishing landscape. So here we have the publication cycle, of course, and we'll talk about this more a little bit later, that there are other avenues to publishing your research. This is kind of an overview or a very simplified model of the publication cycle, where you are, coming up with your research, you're proposing a question, it gets funded potentially, you're reporting on that. And then here in this part of the cycle, even before you write up your article, you are already trying to identify or evaluate potential outputs for the research. So you should be doing that early on, so that when you are putting your manuscript together, or whatever the output may be, that you have already looked up those journals and you know that, okay, do I need to, pay an article processing charge? Do I have to format it in a certain way? What are the requirements of that journal? Does that journal even publish my type of article or study, for example? Um, so then once you submit it, to a journal, again, this is kind of the traditional publication cycle. We'll talk about more non-traditional publication outputs. But once you do that, academic works are evaluated for quality when you submit it to a journal. They're edited by their peers. And of course, this is referring to that peer review process. Once it's gone through that, if it gets accepted, the publication, right, or the publisher provides an editing layout and those publication services, which includes, editing, formatting, making the article available, making sure that, that particular journal is discoverable in multiple databases, right? All of those services that the publisher provides. And that includes the dissemination and access, right? So works may be distributed in print or probably now mostly online. If it is a subscription publication or even open access, it might be through libraries, or even freely available on the web, of course, through the publisher's websites. And then, of course, the work has to be preserved. That's another service that publishers provide. Copies or versions of the work may be saved for posterity, and we'll talk about the different versions of your work and what your options you have. And then, of course, the reuse, right? We'll talk about, impact factors and things like that. But, your work getting read, cited, recombined, built upon. So it's this whole cycle. So we're really focusing on, this part here where you're trying to identify journals and then, of course, understanding what the publishers do, what their role is, and what your rights are as an author and what your options are. So there are several options to disseminate your work, and Sabine will go into more detail with this, of course, as a journal article, and that's kind of the main focus of our talk today, but there are other ways to disseminate your work, whether it's through a book or a monograph. Maybe you're presenting a paper or a poster at a conference. Even before it goes through peer review, before you even submit it to a journal, you can put it in a preprint archive. Press releases or media coverage, or even sharing your research on social media, institutional repositories like ours, FIU Digital Commons, or open repositories like the Open Science Framework, or even if you have your own personal website. So let's talk a little bit about journals. So journals are a periodical, especially one containing scholarly articles that disseminate current information on research and development in a particular subject field. So many times journals are published by professional associations or even university presses, and of course the commercial publishers. They're periodicals, so they are published periodically, and that could differ from journal to journal. They can be published annually, quarterly, monthly, bi-monthly, weekly. Scholarly journals do include research articles, but they will also have review articles, letters to the editor, commentary, even meeting abstracts from those conferences. And then material often is submitted for peer review. So not all journals are peer reviewed, but many do have that peer review process. So why even try to publish, in a journal? Probably the most important reason is because it's how scholars communicate, right? You're part of the scholarly conversation. This helps you to be involved in that research community. You can build on the work of others who have also published in these journal articles. It helps build the corpus of knowledge in your particular subject area. It increases the potential for collaboration and interaction with peers, expanding on your professional network. And it helps add information to the public discussion of topics beyond the academic circles. Other reasons, of course, publishers provide copy editing, typesetting, archiving, as I mentioned before, and access to your work. Articles published in most journals are searchable in a variety of databases, making your work more discoverable. So when a journal says that it's indexed in certain databases or platforms, that's something that you want to look for, because someone may not go specifically to that journal. They may be putting keywords into a search box, either in one of the library databases or Google Scholar. And you want to make sure that the journal is somewhere where, you know, those articles are being searched, basically. So that's something to consider. Of course, career advancement. It may help meet assessment criteria and output performance targets. So when in academia, if you're going for promotion and tenure, right, publishing is something that is looked at, and they are looking for those journal articles, and that could be it's a good thing, but it's also a lot of pressure and to publish. And that kind of causes the issues that we'll talk about later with the deceptive publishing and predatory publishers and things like that. And of course, the journals conduct that peer review or quality check, and this helps add credibility to your work as it's being reviewed by experts in your field. So a little bit about that peer review process. Again, scientists or researchers, they study something. The scientists are going to write their results right into a manuscript. They send it to a journal. The journal editor receives that article, and then they decide whether or not to send it to peer review. They send it out to those peer reviewers, which are those experts in the field. They read the article, provide the feedback to the editor. Then they may send it back to the authors. The authors may make some changes. And this whole process can take potentially months. It could be a long-term thing. And then at the end of all that, and after all the edits and answering the questions from the reviewers, either the article meets the editorial quality and it gets published, or it may get rejected. Okay. So as far as publishing stakeholders, right, when it comes to these journals, there are several. So we have the readers, right? That is the users, the other scholars in your field, students, the public, right? Then you also have the authors, right, which is you. And where do you plan to publish? You have to think about, do you have to pay to publish? And we'll talk about that in a moment. Is your work discoverable? Is it being peer reviewed, right? Then of course the universities, and libraries is kind of tied to this as far as subscribing to journals that charge readers to pay for the content. But universities also play a role in funding research, right? They play a role in maybe funding article processing charges. Maybe your university helps pay for that. We don't have that at the library specifically. We have some discounts with some publishers, but other universities, sometimes they may have like funds to help pay for that. Of course, the funders, right, which are funding the research and many times have open access mandates that require you to make your research openly available for free. So the funders are funding the research, and they may also help you fund making your work open access in some of the journals that require those fees. The publishers, they are making money either way, right? They are not only making your work available, but they are, charging universities, library subscribers to pay for journals that are not freely available. And they also charge you, the authors, to make your work available, for open access in certain journals. So they play a role there too. Of course, as I mentioned, some journals are published by professional associations or societies, right? And then I talked a little bit about libraries and their role. And of course, we do support people throughout this whole process and helping them identify journals, navigating this landscape. And we provide access to subscription journals. We help people search, for articles that are published in these journals. So it's a whole ecosystem where all of us kind of have a stake in the publishing life cycle. So a little bit about journal distribution. And again, why does this matter from the author perspective? It's because if you're trying to publish in any of these journals, these are things that you have to understand because it may affect where you publish and if you have to pay to publish. So in the first column, we have the traditional subscription based. So here, the readers, pay to read the content. Authors are not typically charged to publish their work in these journals. There may be some editing fees, or if you have to pay for like color and things like that, but ultimately you don't have to pay to publish in the journal. Some make the content freely available after a certain time. So maybe after 12 months, all the content in that journal is freely available. So if you don't have money to pay for an article processing charge as an author, maybe find a journal that maybe after 6 months, 12 months, everything is free anyway, right? And your readers will have access to that at a certain time, even if it's not right away. But of course, with this model, the publisher typically retains the copyright and not you, the author, right? Then we move into open access, where the content is free for the readers, right? Readers don't have to pay for this. They don't have to sign in behind the paywall. So in some models of open access, the authors have to pay fees to make their work available for free through this open access model. Of course, this means though that because you're paying, the author typically retains the copyright, sometimes through a Creative Commons license. Many grant funders, like I mentioned before, do require research to be made freely available to readers through these open access options, which are several. We'll talk about these in just a moment. So there's gold, green, diamond or platinum, and mirror. And then, of course, you have the hybrid journals. So these are subscription journals, right, which are the ones that I've mentioned in the first column, that will make an individual article open access right away for a fee to be paid by the author. So again, this is that article processing charge, or APC. I do want to, and we'll reiterate this later, but open access, not all of them charge fees. There are really great open access publications that don't charge an article processing charge. And that really is the best of both worlds, where it's free for readers and authors. So here we have those open access models, where we have the gold. This is where the author, you pay an article processing charge to make your article fully open access. And this could be in a journal that's completely open access and you have to pay to publish in there, or it's a subscription journal and you can make your particular article freely available, and that's those hybrid journals. Of course, you have the green, again, one of the best case scenarios. Authors can post an earlier version of your manuscript, right? Maybe not the full final version that's in the journal, but maybe the accepted manuscript to an open repository. Maybe the repository here at FIU. Maybe PubMed Central, right? If you're doing medicine or biomedical sciences. Then, of course, you have the diamond. This is open access journals that do not charge author fees, right? So it's free for the readers, free for the authors. This is the best case scenario of all. And then, of course, the mirror journals. This is when there is a subscription journal and they have an open access counterpart to it. So you would pick which one you would publish. And if you want your work open access, but you have to pay, or you're in the subscription journal version, but you, the author, don't have to pay, but the readers do. So here are some dollar icons letting you know where the author has to pay for these open access models. So here's kind of a little bit of image of open access publishing. So you, the researcher, you're deciding where to publish. We're going to demo this in a moment, but there's a database, Shopper Romeo, that kind of tells you about all the journal's open access policies, their self-archiving options. And then, of course, you can publish in an open access journal, right? We talked about that. You may have to pay that article processing charge, right? Which is the gold open access. And then this means that immediately your work is available for everyone to read. If you publish in a subscription-based journal, you can search for an open access repository. Again, our FIU Digital Commons is an option for that. And then you can self-archive in that repository your work, right? Which is the green open access. And there might be some options with that. Either you can do the full published version, but there might be a delayed open access, meaning you can't make it available depending on your contract with the publisher, perhaps for 6 months, 12 months, or you make your accepted manuscript the one that's available. Of course, there's also those hybrid journals where you would have to pay the article processing charge if you want your individual article to be open access. And again, anytime that you're paying that APC, it means immediate open access, right? But I want to make the point that that's not the only option, right? You do have this green option where if you don't have the money for the APC, but you're okay with making your submit or accepted manuscript open, then that is an option to still make your work open access without having to pay that APC. Or even looking for a journal where everything becomes freely available after a certain time. So it's not immediate, but it's still open access at some point. So we've talked a lot about open access and why does that matter? Open access is great for many reasons. First, there's more exposure for your work. It's not behind the paywall. So it makes it easier for practitioners to apply your findings. Of course, typically higher citation rates, again, because your work is more accessible. So that could, because it reaches more people, it can influence policy. The public can access your findings, again, because many times public patrons may not always have access to these very expensive journals. It helps you comply with grant rules. Again, grant funded research does require most of the time to make your work freely available. Of course, the taxpayers get value for their money because from the taxpayers, that gets the work funded. So they're seeing that return on their investment, of course. And then researchers in developing countries can see your work as well, which is really important for that that progress and that sharing of information beyond the paywall, right? Leading to more equity. So a little bit about author rights, right? So hopefully this image kind of makes sense. So here you have your paper, right? Your submitted version, preprint. This means that it has not been through peer review. You shouldn't be paying anything at this point. And you can publish your preprint, which is before it's been peer reviewed. You can publish that in several repositories. You don't have to pay anything. And you are the author of that or the copyright owner of that. Once you submit it to the journal, it goes through peer review and the whole editing process, right? And then it gets accepted by the publisher. So this is the accepted manuscript version or post-print. So again, if you decide to, and if the publisher allows it, you can publish this in an institutional repository. Again, kind of a shout out to the FIU Digital Commons, and you can make that available there. And it's a place where it will be saved hopefully forever. It's something you can put on your CV. You can link directly to it. And at this point, you still own the copyright. Now here is where you would transfer that copyright if you're not paying an article processing charge. So the publisher becomes the copyright owner. They're the ones that do the copy editing and typesetting, and then they publish that particular version of the record. So this is the published version over here that they own the copyright to, and then this is the accepted manuscript, which you own the copyright to. And then again, if you pay that article processing charge, then you retain the copyright. And you can do basically whatever you want with that. Again, just to take it back, if there are open access journals that don't have any APCs and you get to keep your, copyright ownership. So, please keep that in mind. So I'm going to quickly demo one of the tools that will help you find what the policies are for a particular journal, right? Whether it's, open access, if you have to pay for open access and things like that. So the tool's called Sherpa Romeo. I don't know if maybe Sabina Ramses want to put the link in the chat. While I kind of get us there. So here we are. This is Sherpa Romeo. And I'm going to go ahead and search a journal. I'm going to search the journal Medical Humanities, kind of to bridge all of our disciplines here that might be represented a little bit. So once you search the journal here, it's going to give you some publication information, the ISSN, things like that. And then here you have the publisher policy, right? And it says that it does have some open access pathways. So the published version, if you remember from that image, was all the way on the right. So here, if you click on this plus sign, it'll tell you what you can do. So if it's required by the funder to make an open access, If you want to make it open access, there is a fee associated with it. So they let you know that right away. There is no embargo, meaning that it's freely available once you pay that fee. That the authors do get to keep that copyright. Where you can or where it will be deposited, which is PubMed Central, right? Which is PubMed is the biomedical database. PubMed Central is their repository for freely available articles. And then different places that you, the author, can put that work in if you pay this particular fee. They also have another pathway for the published version, pathway B. And then here you have the accepted version. So if you remember from that image we saw earlier, this is in the middle. This is before the copy editing, the typesetting, things like that. And here it'll tell you no embargo, meaning that the accepted version can be made available right away. You own the copyright, the author, which is great. And you could put it basically wherever you want, and you don't have to pay anything to post the accepted version. So this is after it's been through peer review.
Uh-oh, we're having some technical difficulties. Uh-oh. Okay, so she was going through Shipper Romeo, and she'll probably be right back. But let's see. Let me share my slideshow and current slide. Oh, are you back?
I'm back. I'm so sorry.
Okay. It
Yeah,
just
yeah.
froze. I'm so sorry.
No, no, thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, so let me just wrap this up really fast here. Okay, so hopefully I don't know where I left off, but basically Sherpa Romeo allows you to find out what are those policies and what versions of your manuscript you can make available and where, and if you have to pay anything. So hopefully I showed that enough. But feel free to explore, and of course we're here to help you. That's why we're here. Okay, let me move on here. Sorry again about the disconnect. And I'm on campus,
You're
so
on
I'm not
campus.
sure, but
Yeah, me neither.
it happens. I don't know. Okay, so just a couple more notes about open access. Journals can be more or less open, as we saw, right? Depending on the hybrid thing, or if they end up charging authors or not. But their degree of openness has nothing to do with the impact that they have, their prestige, right? You have some really wonderful, great journals that are open access, the quality of their peer review or their peer review methodology, their sustainability, their effect on your tenure and promotion, and the quality of the articles that are published in it. So again, open access is a good thing, right? Of course, there are financial barriers in some cases because of those author processing charges or article processing charges. Okay, so all that to say that open access journals are not predatory, and that term gets thrown a lot, the whole predatory publishers or predatory journals. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and what that is, but we just want to make sure that we're very clear that just because it's open access or it might charge a fee, that does not mean that they're predatory or that they're low quality. So I'll talk about this in more detail a little bit later, but predatory publishers, these are publishers that kind of try to exist or take advantage of this landscape that I've just kind of laid out. They prioritize self-interest at the expense of scholarship. They're basically trying to charge those fees, but don't actually offer the services. They deviate from those best editorial publication practices. They're not very transparent, and they use aggressive or indiscriminate solicitation practices. So they're looking for researchers like you to try to get you to pay and publish in their journals. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but we wanted to make sure that you know, that you're aware that open access does not mean predatory. So I'm going to pause here for just a second, apologize for my technical difficulty one more time, and see if there are any questions about anything we've covered as far as open access or author rights before I turn it over to Sabine. Does Sherpa have most journals listed? I think it has a lot of them. I can't say all of them, you know, but it is a free resource. Hold on a second. It is a free resource. So it is accessible to all. I have to look and see how they're able to collect the information or where they collect it from. But I want to say that they have a lot of them listed. Yeah, I don't think it's just biomedical or science or, you know. Yeah, thank you for the question. All right, Sabine. Oh,
Okay,
you're muted.
so
There you go.
thank you. All right, so my section is, I'm gonna be talking about identifying journals and other outputs for your research. And I kind of been lucky that I've been able to uh, kind of target most of these outputs in my own research. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. I think I've kind of done a little bit of everything over the years, so just let me know. Okay, first, how do you identify potential journals? We're going to talk, that's pretty much the gist of my entire section. So basically, you can ask people, you can do the thing where you ask your colleagues, you can ask other faculty members, or your student, you can ask, professors. Sometimes your professors on editorial board, if you happen to be a student at FIU, some of the professors on the editorial boards or peer review boards, and they know the journal, which journal, what they're looking for too as far as scope. So you want to do the next thing you want to do is you want to search for the literature on your topic and make a list of the journals. And some of the things that I'm going to talk about, like the journal finders, will help you do that. So it's kind of automated for you. And then you want to review your list of references. Like, I forgot what they call it. Does anyone remember, librarian? Like the backwards, when you look at your references to get more references. So you can look at your list of references, see where they've published their journal and see if that's something that would kind of match where you want to publish as well. And you can use tools, like I said, like Jane, SpyHub, Journal Guide, EndNote, Manuscript Matcher. And there's a lot more resource, a lot more out there. And you can just find the one that you like out of the ones that are out there. And you can also browse for journal title in your actual discipline. All you have to do is just go into journal citation reports. I don't think it's Web of Science anymore. I think it's Clarivate, but it's journal citation reports, and you go in and you just kind of look through your area and see what journals pop up and kind of do that. And then also, as you guys got the demo, you can use Sherpa Romeo to kind of match, identify journals. So some of the questions, these are questions you should be asking yourself, like when you're choosing a format for your publication or for your research, I would say. Why am I publishing? Who is my audience? Are my expectations reasonable? Which journals are most relevant to my research area? Should I attempt to publish in a top tier journal? Are there other publications that might serve my purpose? And this was done by Ramses, so shout out to Ramses. But these are really good questions. These are really good questions that you really should be asking yourself, because this is very important, because you can get a lot of rejections if you're not sure of the expectations or of the audience that you're trying to reach. I'll give you an example. I'm on a board of a journal for library science discipline. And basically, we'll get things from like the tech world into the journal. And right away, we already know we have to reject it. It doesn't mean that the article isn't good. It just means it's not in the right scope. So just make sure that you're, you know, submitting to the right places. And that's why the journal finders and the rankers and the Sherpa Romeos are so important. Okay. So there are other outputs, like I wasn't when I first started to do research. I'm a doctoral student, so when I first started to do research, I was only aware of like conferences and workshops, because I was a librarian, and that's what we did. We kind of shared our work through conferences and workshops and just speaking at conferences. It's until I started to kind of get more, when I left the public library world and I became an academic library about 10 years ago, I had to start, thinking about, okay, how do I share some of the work that I'm doing? And when I would collaborate with other people from other universities, they would want to do like a white paper, or let's write like a little, conference paper or something, or do you want to do this with me or go for a workshop? So that's how I started. So I wrote a white paper, it's back here, and they actually paid me to write the white paper. So there are different ways to kind of put yourself out there and you could get paid for it sometimes. Conferences, workshop, my favorite, because you get to meet people and talk to people and they give you feedback and live. And then your institutional repository, I did this so much and it pops up in my Google Scholar. So some of the things I've done in my past institution actually pops up in my Google Scholar because it's being aggregated through, Google Scholar. So that's really good. Something that I really like to do is writing blogs and of course sharing my blogs through social media. And I've written a book and I've done book chapters in the past. So there are different ways. You don't have to limit yourself to the traditional journal. It is the best way, I think, as far as like getting the researcher aspect of it. But there are so many other ways you can share your thing. Let me make sure I said everything I wanted to say about each thing. But remember, you can present at conferences physically and virtually. I went to 3 conferences last week and never left my office, and I presented at all 3. And so you don't have to leave, and you don't have to leave your office or your even Miami to or wherever you are at right now to even present. So be mindful of that. There's a lot of conferences out there that are completely virtual. So go for it. As far as white paper, you can target whatever industry or policy area, and there's always someone that's putting that wants that need people to write on these things because they share it and they may they may have to pay for access, but they want your expertise on those things. So when you get to that level, and if you're already at that level, you should definitely consider finding the white paper aspect is a really fun way to share your work. Okay, now move on from there. So we're gonna shift back to choosing the best journal. How popular is a journal? This is also a Ramses questions. How popular is a journal? Does it reach the right readers and fit well with your research goals? Does it match your research area? And does it publish studies that are similar? And I said this to you guys before because it's very important that your work may not be bad, but it just might not be in the right scope, the right place. And I want to stop here and tell you that it's okay to reach out to the editor of that journal and actually email them. I've done that. Like I've done that and they said, you know what? You don't even have to submit it. I'm inviting you to do it. So I reached out and I said, oh, I wrote a book. My book's behind me right here. I wrote a book and I said, I have one of my chapters I would like to make into a journal article because I want to explain this framework that I mentioned in my book. It's conceptual, but I want to do it. And I know I may not get approved, and I'm saying all this stuff to him. And he's like, no, 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 I'm interested in it. Just send it to me. And so these are real people that are really behind the journal. It's not like a robot that's putting it together. This is real people. You can definitely talk to them and ask them, hey, this is my topic. Do you think this would be good? You don't have to give them the article, but just let them know, like give them an overview, like this is what I'm writing about. And I do like open access because I want people to see it, and honestly, a lot of people are like, I would love to read your thing, but it's behind this. And sometimes people, there are times things have been behind paywalls and people have emailed me and said, I read your abstract. I really want to read your article because I've written interdisciplinary, like I've written on education too. So they like, I really want to do it, but I don't have access. So I've given people, my literal original article, or just if I had the PDF, just gave them the PDF. So I'm a big fan of open access. So I really appreciate Daisy, like kind of breaking it down that way. And then also look at how often the journal releases new issues. Does this work with your timeline? Because sometimes there are some things that are kind of timely in our research, and you don't want to, be waiting 2 years or a year. There was one journal, I will not name it, in library science, that people said it took like them a year and a half to get published, and they need it for the promotion and for their files or whatever. When you get into that level, when you're in the university level, you need to get promoted, and sometimes these things don't work for your schedule. And so you have to be mindful of how many issues are they releasing. Is it every year? Is it every, is it quarterly? Is it monthly? Not really monthly, it's usually quarterly, but you want to make sure. And it does take a while. Like I wrote something one year and I completely forgot I wrote it, like until it popped up in my Google Scholar, and I was like, oh my God, I forgot that I even wrote that, because it had been so long since I submitted it. So especially since you write it, because I wrote it way before, and then I'm submitting it and then it gets published. So okay, this is something that I think is, I found a website and I was just kind of doing the research for this workshop. And I do think, using a checklist, especially if you're a newbie, like most of you guys have said, are new to this. There's a website called thinkchecksubmit.org, and it's like a coalition of different publishers and open access journals that kind of put this website together. And basically, it has both checklists for books and journals. And maybe I could stop and share that website, but I wanna make sure I can, but I'll add that into the comment. Let me take my.
Oh, I added it to the chat,
Oh,
Sabine.
good, thank you, thank you. So, thank you very much. So basically, those checklists were really good. Like I was looking through it and I was like, especially as someone who's written a book and someone who's published it in a journal, in the past, and I've done conference papers as well. I kind of love the checklist. I think it's really good, especially if you're a newbie, like to kind of keep yourself on track and make sure that you're doing what you need to do. So that's that. Okay, so the online tools, there are two different things, and I wanted to make sure that you guys know the differences between a finder and a ranker, or rankings, journal rankings. So these tools, especially journal finders, they're designed to help you find suitable journals for submitting your transcript, or your manuscript. So they suggest journals based on factors like the title, your abstract, your keywords that you're using, and your research field. So there are two that I would say right now off the top of my head is Elsevier's Journal Finder and Springer's Journal Suggester. And believe it or not, Journal Citation Reports actually has a manuscript matcher that I just saw like 2 days ago on their website as well. So it's not only a ranker, but it's actually a matcher as well. So that's really good. It's the best of both worlds. So basically, journal finders assist in matching content with journals, and then rankers help you evaluate a journal's standing and impact in the academic community. That's very important to some people in the academic community. I'm not going to talk about that. We'll let Daisy get to that. Okay, so here are some like useful journal finder tools, and all this we'll share this we can even share the slides, and we'll share the recording as well. But Springer Journal Suggester, IEEE Publication Recommender, Jane, Taylor and Francis Journal Suggester, I'm sorry, Spy Hub, Elsevier's Journal Finder, and DOAJ. That's actually a directory of open access journals, and they basically, you can search for different journals that are open access, and there's so much more. There's so much more. And then you have the rankers. We have two of these, two of these are in our, that's why I mentioned them here. They're in our actual databases. So IGN Factor Metrics and Journal Citation Reports. And Google Scholar actually does have journal ranking as well. So that's something people use a lot, especially when you want to make your profile in Google Scholar, when you start to, contribute to the scholarly conversation, so you can keep track of your own research as well, and you can like share the link quickly. But today we're going to talk a little bit about journal citation reports. I'm going to stop my share just for a moment. And I'm going to escape and go back in. All right, so can you guys see my screen here?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I looked up education because that's like I love library science and education together. I always look things up like that in educational technology. So I decided to do my area that I'm interested in. So Journal of Education, I looked that up. And so basically in journal citation reports, well, I'll go back to that. But journal citation reports is a tool that's provided by Clarivate, and it provides like an overview. And sometimes, especially if you're doctoral students, a lot of my doctoral students that I've been working with, their professors will have these assignments as, oh, go look up the journal citation factor or look up this and look up the abstract. All of it is here. So you don't have to go outside and look to each journal, to each Taylor and Francis, and go to all these different websites and things like that. You can definitely do it in this one place. And basically, the journal impact factor measures the average number of citations that the journal has received in the past year. So, and it also gives you like some of the citable items, and you can see here that it's just a metric that you can use, like, okay, this is a journal that has this. And I'm not a well versed in like, oh, what does all this mean? You know, maybe Ramses might know or Daisy might be able to, but some people follow this. I don't follow it as closely. I've never found value in following like the impact factor. But some places that you work in, they'll tell you you're looking for a journal of this level or whatever, you know, and you want to find it at this level. So some places do that. And basically, the ranking in the categories that you'll see here, it kind of allow you to see how the journals rank within a specific subject as well. So you have, you know, all of the different citations and all the graphs and things like that, but you'll get to see where it ranks in the subject, and that's basically it. So basically, as you can see, it gives it a score like 522 out of 760. So that's the rank that they're in. It also has all these other metrics that you can look at as far as your 5-year impact factor. Let me see if I can find that in the bottom. And you could look at the other, you know, journals, the top 20 journals that are citing. So let's say you've been reading a lot from this journal of education. These are the top 20 journals that are citing journal of education. So as you can see, this is, you know, related. So this is how you can start searching through too. And that's what I've done in the past with some students. And some professors that I've helped in the past in my last institution. So, and it also goes by where are people contributing? And so some universities, they love, you know, like the journal that I'm a part of, there's one university in California that just like a lot of people submitted to it. And so that's like their ranking #1, like that university submitted a lot of papers to the journal. And so they have that. It's just so many rankings and metrics that you can use here. And they have the eigen factor score. And if all these kind of, they kind of explain what they all are. But that's what I was talking about earlier, is the 5-year impact factor. So basically, it's the average number of time that the journal has been cited by other journal articles and things like that. I mean, by other authors. So that's that. That's the entirety of that, but it's a lot of metrics, a lot of things that you can kind of go through and kind of get to know. And I really like using this tool, especially looking at, you know, what's been cited. That kind of gives me an idea of where I should publish. Any questions on JCR? I'm gonna pause really quickly and go back to my slide. Any questions or any questions? Let me put it back on the slide. Give me one moment. Teams. Any questions? Okay, that's awesome. Let me see if we have any questions in the chat. And I'm sorry, but I forgot to share the link to JCR. You have to log in. I'm sorry, it didn't do the full thing, but let me see if I can fix that. There it is. You have to log in with your FIU login, and you can go in, and also it's in the A to Z database. I did want to mention that it is in the A to Z database, listed database. You just, you know, Control F, Journal Citation Finders, or you can just look in our search and you'll find it. And also we have the eigenfactor metrics as well. And so those two are available through your FIU login. So next we have, evaluating journals for fit. So I'm gonna throw it back to Daisy to kind of give us more info on that.
All right. I'm not sharing yet, right? Okay, just making
Thank you.
sure.
Thank you, Sarah. No, you're not sharing yet.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, great. All right. Okay. All right, so our next piece here, after kind of identifying potential journals, and you always want to try to identify maybe more than one, then you kind of have to go on kind of on a little adventure to try to find information about those journals. And some of the tools that Sabine mentioned, like journal citation reports, do provide some of the pieces of information that you need in order to evaluate um some aspects of the journal that may influence your decision on which one to submit to. So evaluating potential publications, starting with a data-driven approach, right, which is a nice segue from Sabine's demo from the journal citation reports, where you can find information about rankings, you can find information about impact factor, you can find out information about the different categories that that journal belongs to. And like she said, maybe, where people are publishing that have cited your work or that have cited work from that particular journal. So there are several tools that you can use to help you make those decisions. There are review guides. FIU Libraries has several, potentially directories. We'll talk about those in just a moment to learn about the journals. The guides are organized by discipline most of the time. And it allows users to check for any currency or changes in the publication flow. There are title changes as well. Journals change titles. It can happen quite often in their lifetime of the journal. Sometimes they even change publishers as well. As far as the directories, there's Cabels or Cabels. FIE does not subscribe to this particular directory, but what it does is that it will give you information about a journal as far as like its acceptance rates, the metrics, right? Aggregates some of that data. But it also has something they call, I believe, predatory reports, which give information or list journals that have kind of they're not following the best editorial practices. So it does help. It's not the end all be all. When I talk about predatory publishing, I'll mention this, but you do have to be careful with that. You don't want to just, kind of always assume something is predatory just because it's on a certain list. Every journal deserves that look. Where you're kind of using those checklists, like Sabine mentioned, like think, check, submit. There are several online that you're looking for those quality indicators. And then, of course, Ulrich's Web, which FIU does subscribe to. This particular resource is a directory for journals. And it doesn't give you acceptance rates or article processing charges, but it does give you information about any title changes, if it's subscription or open access, if it, how often it publishes, right? If it's quarterly, monthly, etc. And then you want to think about, there's certain things to consider, right? About journals and how they behave and, different things, right? That you maybe don't always expect when you're going to submit something. So some journals, depending on their I guess their prestige or their year that they're in, they may or may not accept cold submissions, right? They may only accept invited content and things like that. So always look at their policies, right, on their website before you consider that journal. As Sabine had a great example about this, some of them do have those longer publication cycles or wait lists, right? Because they do get a lot of submissions. And sometimes their acceptance rates are not super high. Maybe they only take, 10% of everything that's submitted to them, and that could, extend the process. The formatting is important. So if you are not looking at those author instructions in advance and you submit something and you didn't follow what they asked, that could easily get you rejected. And that's something that kind of can be fixed in advance or foreseen. You can avoid that hurdle altogether just by following those instructions. Being open to publishing in cognate or related fields. So it depends. Like maybe, Sabine had a great example about the text submissions for the library journals. But depending on your research, you may be touching upon several different disciplines, where perhaps if it's like a tech article, but it involves something with libraries, let's say in our discipline, it might be an okay fit, you know, depending on what it is. So, you know, don't get that tunnel vision of like, well, this is my field. You know, there may be other journals that may be interested in your content, right? It's just going to depend on what your research is. And then, of course, review the current table of contents for journals for any themes or common topics to help you see if your particular research fits within that scope. Impact factors and metrics, Sabine touched upon this. Bibliometrics, when you see them, that's just basically statistical methods to help analyze how publications do, how often the articles that are within it are cited, how often even author impact as well. And then citation analysis and examination of frequency of and patterns within citations. So this is used to identify most important publications. So we really, and I think we're trying to make the point that, you know, these metrics, although helpful to kind of get you started, they should not be the only factor that you consider when you're making this decision. You know, just because an article is published in a very high impact journal does not mean that the article itself is potentially as impactful, you know. The impact factor doesn't tell the whole story. So that's something that we really kind of want to drive home. It's just one piece of the puzzle. Of course, different disciplines have different behaviors as far as how things get cited, you know, potentially things like, you know, I work at the medical library, so things in medicine and biomedical sciences might get published or, sorry, cited just a little bit more just because of how that particular research may be used. So if a humanities journal or a social science journal may not have as high of an impact, that doesn't mean that it's not a wonderful or great journal in that discipline. It just means that the citing behavior is going to be different. So you can't, it's not a one size fits all situation with the impact factors. So really quick, as far as how this is calculated, and a quick word, impact factor is used, you know, as if it were like how do I explain this? The impact factor, right? That name, right, is proprietary to Clarivet, to Web of Science, to the journal citation reports that Sabine showed. If the journal is not in the Web of Science collections, it does not get an impact factor calculated, right? So when people say the JIF or the journal impact factor, it has to come from Clarivet. And the reason I'm mentioning is because when we talk about predatory publishers, they will say impact factor and they'll throw that around, but that journal actually is not even in Web of Science, and therefore it doesn't have an impact factor. So it is a proprietary thing that you do need to go into GCR to find. And again, with the calculation, it's based on the number of the citable articles published for 2 years, and then the number of citations for the year following those 2 years. So again, it's the citations, how many times somebody has cited something from those journals over all the publications that can be citable in the last 2 years before it. So again, this is proprietary to the Web of Science. There are other metrics out there. Sabine mentioned some of these. Some of these are for journal specific, right? Metrics. Some have author specific metrics, like as far as an individual author's impact, how many times maybe their work has been cited by others, perhaps even an average. You know, another database that the library subscribes to, Scopus, does have some other journal ranking information as well. And then, of course, Google Scholar also does provide some analysis too. So should we care about this, right? So I guess what we're trying to say is, yeah, you know, you know, and again, it's going to depend on, you know, even your own promotion and tenure, right? They may have that requirement like, oh, you have to publish in a journal with this certain impact factor. And of course, it's a kind of a little bit of a vicious cycle because that really doesn't tell the whole story of the quality of that journal. Your article may be the perfect fit in another journal, and it doesn't necessarily mean have to be the highest impact journal. But don't rely on just one metric. You know, be open to alternative options. The alt metrics, that's when your work has been shared or reshared on social media platforms, let's say, or online. So Sabine talked a little bit about that, about sharing your work online. So it's not gonna always be the same. Of course, always talk to your colleagues. If they've published already, they may be familiar with some of those journals and that process. And of course, know your own goals depending on what you want to do. That will dictate, your decision. It's not just like about the impact factor. A little bit about paying for publication. I talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but there may be fees associated with publishing in a subscription journal. It might be things like about either you have to be a member of a certain society or organization in order to publish in that journal, or you may have to pay for like, color for your images, let's say, or figures. And then, of course, once they accept your article, if they do have that article processing charge, which you should know that in advance, and how much it is. And if they're not being transparent about that, then that's already a red flag. Then you would have to pay those fees post acceptance. If they're asking for money up front before they even accept it, that's a red flag too, right? That shouldn't be happening. So ways to decrease your expenses, identify those potential journals before developing the article. That way you're not surprised. Be familiar with the cost before submitting. As I said, always have a couple of journals that you're looking into. And if the journal does require author payment, make sure that you add those costs into your grant applications or your other funding sources. Ask your department if they do have funds for publishing. The library guide that's linked on this page has listed some of the discounts that the library provides. I know off the top of my head, I think Cambridge, it's 100% because we subscribe to journals from that publisher. If you publish in one of those journals as an FIU affiliate, you're able to publish in those journals without having to pay an APC. You want to contact the publisher directly, and they should answer you. If they don't, another red flag. And of course, the website of the journal of the publisher may have discounts as well. So that leads us back to predatory publishing, which tries to take advantage of this, right? Again, these are fee-based publishers that do not provide those expected publication services. This does not include those open access journals, again, reiterating that point. The predatory publishers will often charge additional fees if you want to withdraw your article. So if you happen to submit to one of these and you realize that it was a mistake, and you want to withdraw your submission even, or even a published article, they may charge you to do that. So that's why we're trying to caution you to do all these evaluations, to check with your librarian, so that you don't fall into that situation. These publishers are actively deceptive, right? Not just inept. So what this means is they're really trying to make money. But there are low quality journals or publishers out there, not necessarily out to make money, but maybe they're just new, starting out. That doesn't mean they're predatory, right? So there is kind of a fine line there. And, if you need help kind of trying to figure that out, librarians can help. So what it isn't, I'm not going to go through the entire slide because I think we've already talked about this, but those open access journals, again, the predatory publishers try to take advantage of that model, but just because it's open access does not mean that it's predatory. So some red flags to look out for. This is part of evaluating those publications. If the journal title sounds like another famous, well-known journal, but it's kind of off, that's a tactic that predatory journals use to confuse authors. If the journal scope is really wide and nebulous and vague, and very general, that's also a red flag. Usually journals are very intentional about the scope and aim of their content. The information that's provided includes unofficial or made up impact factors, right? Talked about that. The publisher contact info is not available. So if you see just a contact form, right, or add a Hotmail or something like that, that's a potential red flag. If it says submit and we can publish your work or do fast peer review in 2 weeks or 1 week, that is a red flag. As I mentioned, peer review does typically take longer than that. It should. Articles have many grammatical or spelling mistakes, or even the website itself. The information on the charges is hard to find or may ask for money up front. And there's no information provided on policies. as far as your author rights, copyright, licensing, and things like that, or how they plan to preserve your work. And of course, this isn't listed here, but when you start publishing, you might get emails, a lot of spam email from publishers that are very, oh, we saw your article, you're so great, we'd love to have you in our journal. Like, not that some of those cannot be legitimate, but that is a tactic that they use. They use that flattery. They promise fast peer review and publication. So those are things to kind of look out for. As far as indicators of legitimacy, if the articles are indexed properly, right? If the journals are indexed in databases and they truly are in there, not that they just said that they are, then that's, a good thing. That it's clear about its peer review process, about the costs that are associated, that the editors are indeed experts in the field and that they're not made up. Sometimes they're not made up people. Sometimes they're actual people on these editorial boards of predatory publishers. But then you see that they're not affiliated with the journal at all. The journal scope is clear, it's defined, and it's reinforced by the articles published. So again, if the scope and the things that they're actually published do not match, that is a red flag for something that may not be legitimate. Again, transparent. DOIs, not every journal or publisher may have DOIs, but a lot of them do. So that's not, just because it doesn't have a DOI doesn't mean it's not legitimate. So any questions about that, about deceptive publishing, about evaluating journals? There's a lot of really great checklists online, like the Think Check Submit. I think also there's one from Loyola Marymount. It's a really great one that has all these questions to try to evaluate journals. So there's a lot of tools online to help you evaluate. And of course, we're here, the librarians, of course. That's what we do. Okay, so we did have a question. Oh, okay. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we did have a question. What is the most effective method for determining the acceptance rate of a journal? Um, I a lot of them may say that themselves on their own page. Actually, I think I have that medical humanities one open, I think still. Um, yeah, I have it here. So here actually they do say right from the beginning that their acceptance rate is 26%. So they do have that. I think also some of those journal finders that Sabine mentioned, at least the publisher ones like Elsevier, Springer, when you look those up, if the journal is published by any of those, it sometimes also has the acceptance rate. There's also another one called Journal Guide that has the acceptance rate for some journals. So sometimes they'll say it. If not, then we kind of have to hunt for it. I don't think JCR has acceptance rates, but I don't know if Sabine, if you want to correct me on that one.
I'm not sure. I don't remember off the top of my head. Let me.
Yeah, I don't think they do.
I think
Yeah,
sometimes, well, the thing is, it links to the journal when you're in JCR, so
yeah.
it's pretty much right there. Like when you go into most journals, they tell you they put their own impact factor. They do it. They try to keep up with what Clarivate has on their website. So definitely, the acceptance rate is a big deal, because that means that they get a lot and they just can only do 5 articles and out of the 40 that they've gotten. So doesn't mean that's why I like Daisy's advice at the end where pick 2 or 3 journals because it's not doesn't mean that the article wasn't good. It just means they might not be able to, maybe the scope of it for that issue, they might be doing a special issue and they may not be able to do it. Sometimes they'll defer you to the next issue. They'll say, hey, we like it, but can we put you in because we're doing a special issue, can you wait 3 more months for us to get to the next issue? That's happened to some of our authors when I was as being a part of an editorial board. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Sabine.
um,
Francis, did you want to add anything or no?
No, I think you
No?
guys pretty much covered it all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good, yeah. Well, we do have a couple tips as we try to close out here. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself too if that's a little bit easier. But again, you want to read through the journal scope carefully, look through those recent issues to see if your work kind of is in that ballpark. I don't think we mentioned this earlier, but in addition to the journal finders, you can always run a search in a database, whichever database you use it to look for articles, with keywords that kind of match what you're doing. And seeing what other journals, what other journals those articles are being published in. So as you're going through the search results, you can see what journals keep popping up. So that's another way to kind of find journals that could potentially or maybe interested in your research. Make sure that you read through author guidelines and instructions carefully. You don't want that to be the reason why the work, doesn't go ahead, right? Doesn't go forth to peer review. Update the manuscript with the journal's formatting and style requirements. Know that the requirements for the manuscript may be different from the requirements for the final version. Um, Begin to get permission for reusing figures or tables in the manuscript. So make sure you do that in advance, right? If you are publishing and you're using something from somewhere else, that you may have to get permission from the authors or the copyright holders of that. So make sure you do that with enough time. So that's not like a roadblock later when you've sent it in and they're like, hey, did you get permission to use this? And then you have to go back and try to figure that out. Don't give up. If the manuscript is rejected, that could be disheartening, but there may be other options, right? Maybe starting off like one of the options Sabine mentioned, like present it at a conference first, get some feedback there, and then develop it as for a manuscript. Consider different journals. Ask your colleagues for help, of course. And we are here, the librarians. If, the publishing landscape is a rocky place. So
Yeah.
we are here to help you navigate and answer any questions. And if we don't know the answers, we will find them. Um, so with that, we'll check in one more time if you have any questions, but we're really thankful that you're here. And we hope that this was helpful in at least introducing you to these considerations when you're going to publish. Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I hope
Great.
this helps you get started, and we're here for you. If you need anything, we're always here. Any librarian
Yes.
is here for you. Thank you.